Are you brave enough to admit that the greatest prison you have ever lived inside was never made of steel or stone, but was built silently inside your own skull, formed by every doubt you swallowed, every fear you rehearsed, every false belief you allowed to become law in your private universe, and that the wealth you say you want has always been standing just outside the door of your own perception, waiting for you to finally realize that the lock was never on the outside but on the inside, shaped by your habits of thought and your emotional obedience to limitation. Because this is where the true story begins, not in the marketplace or the bank account or the lottery ticket, but in the quiet, invisible chamber of the mind where ideas are either born into power or aborted by disbelief before they ever draw breath. And it is here, in this unseen realm, that your destiny has been either cultivated or quietly suffocated while you were busy blaming the world. And now you are listening because somewhere deep inside you feel a strange discomfort, a recognition that the life you are living is not the full measure of what you could be, that the hunger you feel is not just for money but for alignment, for permission to become the person who no longer negotiates with fear. And as these words flow into you, they are not meant to entertain but to awaken, because every great fortune, every empire, every breakthrough was first a vibration in the mind of someone who refused to accept the reality they were handed, and instead decided to author a new one, not by frantic effort but by disciplined inner governance, by mastering the silent war between desire and doubt. And Napoleon Hill understood this when he wrote that whatever the mind can conceive and believe it can achieve, but what he also understood, and what the Stoics mastered centuries earlier, was that belief without self-command is fragile, that desire without emotional discipline becomes desperation, and that desperation is the invisible repellent that pushes success away even as you chase it. So if your wealth has been blocked, it is not because you lack opportunity, but because your mind has been vibrating in contradiction, craving abundance while secretly worshipping scarcity, wanting freedom while remaining emotionally enslaved to fear. And this contradiction creates a static in the subconscious that scrambles every signal you send into the universe. Because the subconscious does not respond to what you say you want, but to what you consistently feel to be true. And most people feel unworthy, unsafe, and uncertain, even as they speak the language of ambition. And this emotional incoherence becomes the invisible wall that keeps money, success, and opportunity at a distance, because the world is not a random chaos, but a mirror that reflects back the dominant tone of your inner life. And if your inner life is ruled by anxiety, resentment, impatience, or self-doubt, then the outer world will faithfully echo those frequencies in the form of missed chances, unstable income, and repeating patterns of struggle. And this is not mysticism but psychology and metaphysics working together in perfect cold precision, because your thoughts generate emotions, your emotions generate decisions, and your decisions generate habits, and your habits generate results. And if you want different results, you must become ruthless about the quality of your inner dialogue, because that dialogue is the script that your subconscious performs on the stage of reality. And this is where the Stoics enter like ancient surgeons of the psyche, cutting away the illusions that make you weak, teaching that you cannot control the world, but you can control your judgments about it, and in that control lies freedom. Because when you stop reacting emotionally to circumstances, you stop broadcasting neediness into the universe, and neediness is the enemy of wealth. Because money flows toward confidence, toward clarity, toward those who move as if they are already internally complete, not toward those who are begging reality to fill a hole inside them. And so the first fix for your blocked wealth is not to chase more opportunities, but to purify the signal you are sending, to bring your mind into coherence, where what you desire and what you feel are finally aligned. And this alignment begins with brutal honesty, with asking yourself not what you want, but what you believe you deserve, because that belief is the true thermostat of your life, silently regulating how high you are allowed to rise before some invisible hand of self-sabotage pulls you back down to the level that feels familiar, and most people mistake familiarity for safety. Even when that familiarity is poverty, struggle, or emotional exhaustion, because the nervous system craves what it knows, not what is best. And this is why change feels threatening even when it promises liberation, because your subconscious is designed to protect the old identity, not the future one. And so when you decide to pursue wealth, your old identity rises like a ghost and whispers that you are not that kind of person, that people like you do not get rich, that success is for others. And if you listen to that whisper, you will unconsciously sabotage every chance you get, missing deadlines, undercharging, hesitating, procrastinating, not because you are lazy, but because your mind is loyal to the story it has been telling about you for years. And that story must be rewritten with the same deliberate intensity that a Stoic rewrites his judgments, because the Stoic knows that it is not events that disturb us, but our opinions about them. And Napoleon Hill knew that it is not circumstances that limit us, but our beliefs about what we can do with them. And when you merge these two truths, you begin to see the architecture of power, that your mind is both the gatekeeper and the jailer of your wealth. And the key is not external, but internal, forged by the discipline to observe your own thoughts without obeying them, to feel fear without letting it dictate your actions, to desire wealth without becoming emotionally dependent on its arrival. Because the moment you need something to feel whole, you push it away, but the moment you are internally whole, you become magnetic. And this is the paradox that separates those who struggle from those who flow, because the flow state is not frantic striving, but relaxed certainty, a calm conviction that what you have imagined is already on its way. And this conviction is not loud but quiet, not desperate but grounded, not chaotic but controlled. And the Stoics would call this tranquility of mind, and Napoleon Hill would call it faith, and they are two names for the same inner posture, a posture of unshakable alignment between thought, emotion, and intention. And when you stand in that posture, the world rearranges itself around you in ways that feel like luck, but are actually law, because the law of attraction is not a wishing well, but a psychological and energetic feedback loop. And if you keep feeding it doubt, you will keep receiving delay. If you keep feeding it resentment, you will keep receiving resistance. But if you feed it clarity and disciplined belief, you will begin to notice doors opening where walls once stood. And this is not because the world changed, but because you did. And this change begins in the smallest moments, in the way you speak to yourself when you fail, in the way you interpret rejection, in the way you handle uncertainty, because every time you react emotionally to a setback, you reinforce the identity of someone who is at the mercy of life. But every time you respond with calm analysis, you reinforce the identity of someone who commands their inner world. And the one who commands their inner world eventually commands their outer world, because the outer world has no choice but to mirror the dominant state of the inner one. And so if you want to fix your blocked wealth, you must become a guardian of your consciousness, refusing to let fear rent space in your mind, refusing to let envy poison your perception, refusing to let impatience sabotage your persistence, because persistence is not just doing something again and again, but holding a vision steady in your imagination long enough for it to harden into reality. And this is where imagination becomes the womb of wealth, because every fortune is first gestated as an image, a mental picture charged with emotion. And if that emotion is anxiety, the image collapses. But if that emotion is confident expectancy, the image grows stronger. And the Stoics would tell you to remove the anxiety by detaching from the outcome while still committing to the action. To act as if success is your duty rather than your desire. Because when you make wealth a duty to your potential instead of a craving for validation, you remove the emotional volatility that makes most people quit. And this is why so many give up right before the breakthrough, because they were emotionally invested in a timeline rather than spiritually committed to a process. And the process of wealth is boring to the undisciplined mind. It is repetition, refinement, resilience, and rational adjustment, not the dramatic overnight transformation that the ego fantasizes about. And yet within this slow, disciplined process lies the alchemy of identity. Because every day you persist, you are telling your subconscious a new story about who you are, a story of someone who does not retreat, someone who does not collapse under pressure, someone who does not negotiate with self-doubt. And as this story becomes dominant, it begins to override the old one, and this is the real manifestation. Not the arrival of money, but the transformation of the self who can hold it, because money is a multiplier of who you already are, and if you are internally chaotic, it will amplify chaos. If you are internally disciplined, it will amplify power. And this is why so many people who win the lottery end up broke, because their minds were never trained to be rich, and so the money only exposed the lack of inner structure. And the Stoics would nod knowingly at this, because they taught that wealth without virtue is dangerous, and Napoleon Hill would agree, because he taught that riches without a definite purpose become destructive. And so the true fix for your blocked wealth is not a new strategy, but a new standard of self-mastery, a new relationship to your own thoughts, where you no longer identify with every fear that passes through your mind, but observe it like a cloud drifting across the sky of your awareness, knowing that it cannot harm you unless you give it authority. And this observation creates space, and in that space, you can choose a different response. A response rooted in reason, vision, and disciplined faith. And when you practice this again and again, you begin to feel something shift inside you. A quiet confidence that does not need external proof. A sense that you are becoming someone who can be trusted with more. And the universe, which is really just the sum of all feedback loops, begins to test this new identity by offering you opportunities that require you to show up as this new self. And if you hesitate, you will feel the old fear tugging at you. But if you step forward anyway, you will feel the exhilaration of alignment. And this is how wealth begins to flow. Not as a sudden miracle, but as a series of small, courageous choices that compound over time, into a life that looks extraordinary from the outside, but feels inevitable from the inside. Because inevitability is what happens when belief, emotion, and action finally move in the same direction. And so, as you listen to this, you may feel a strange mix of discomfort and excitement, because part of you recognizes that you have been the gatekeeper of your own limitations, and that part of you is ready to unlock the door. And that door does not open with a key made of effort, but with a key made of awareness. Awareness of the stories you tell yourself, the emotions you indulge, the standards you tolerate, and as this awareness grows, you begin to see how many of your struggles were self-created, not because you are flawed, but because you were unconscious. And consciousness is the beginning of power, because when you see the pattern, you can change it. And when you change the pattern, you change the future. And this is where your blocked wealth starts to breathe again. Not because money suddenly falls from the sky, but because you have finally stopped choking it with doubt. And as you continue this inner work, you will notice that the world feels less hostile, less random, more responsive, as if reality itself is listening to your internal state and adjusting accordingly. And in a way it is, because reality is the echo of your dominant vibration, and when that vibration becomes calm, confident, and clear, the echo becomes opportunity, stability, and growth. And this is the sacred marriage of Stoic control and Hill's metaphysical law, the understanding that you are both the architect and the occupant of your mental home. And if that home is filled with cluttered fears and limiting beliefs, there is no room for wealth to move in. But when you clear the space with disciplined thought and emotional mastery, you create a vacuum that abundance rushes to fill. Because nature abhors emptiness. And so, as this first chapter of your inner awakening closes, you may begin to sense that the real work has only just begun, that the fixing of your blocked wealth is not a one-time decision, but a daily practice of mental hygiene, a commitment to guard your inner world with the same seriousness that a king guards his borders, because what crosses those borders becomes your fate. And now that you know this, you cannot unknow it, and that knowledge is both a burden and a gift, because it means you are no longer a victim of circumstance, but a participant in creation. And as we move deeper into this exploration, you will begin to feel the old patterns loosening their grip, not because they are weak, but because you are becoming stronger. And this strength is not loud but silent, not aggressive but steady, not desperate but deliberate. And it is from this place that true wealth is born, not just in your bank account but in your being. Because the richest people in the world are not those who have the most money, but those who have mastered the mind that creates it. And this mastery is now within your reach, if you are willing to claim it. Imagine standing at the edge of a precipice, the wind tugging at the edges of your consciousness, and realizing that everything you have ever called failure, every missed opportunity, every empty bank account, every moment of shame or regret, was not punishment from the world, but a mirror reflecting the state of your inner mind. This is where most people falter. They look outward for blame, seeking villains in colleagues, governments, circumstances, or chance itself, unaware that the true enemy has been seated inside their own skull all along, whispering rules that bind, fears that suffocate, doubts that masquerade as truth. And yet there is hope, because the mind is not only the jailer of your wealth, but also its architect. The same neural pathways that have trained you to fail, to hesitate, to doubt, can be rewired, rebuilt, sculpted into instruments of precision, instruments that can channel desire into manifestation with the certainty of natural law. Napoleon Hill called this the principle of autosuggestion, the conscious feeding of your subconscious with images of success until it becomes a living, breathing part of you. A code written into your nervous system, a vibration that no circumstance can cancel. The Stoics, centuries before, would have understood this as the discipline of attention, the ability to see clearly what is within your control and to let the rest wash past you like leaves on a river, untouched and unshaken, because the mind that cannot distinguish between what it can influence and what it cannot is forever at war with the universe. Your mind is not merely a thinking machine, it is a magnetic field, an energy generator, a silent broadcasting station. Every emotion you entertain, every judgment you accept, every story you tell yourself is a signal sent out into the world. When fear, doubt, or envy dominate your internal landscape, the universe does not ignore them. It reflects them back in the form of obstacles, scarcity, and resistance. Conversely, when your mind is disciplined, calm, and aligned with clear desire, opportunity begins to appear, almost as if the universe itself has been waiting for you to be coherent enough to handle it. Wealth, in this sense, is less a prize to chase than a phenomenon that responds to a refined inner signal, a phenomenon that the untrained mind cannot perceive because it is lost in chaos, noise, and emotional turbulence. The LW is merciless. It does not reward intention alone, only consistent, disciplined alignment between thought, emotion, and action. And herein lies the paradox. Most people want wealth without the discipline to cultivate it inside themselves. They want abundance without first mastering their inner world, and the universe responds exactly as it must. It mirrors the incoherence they broadcast. Consider desire itself. It is the spark that ignites the engine of creation, yet desire without mastery is like fire without a hearth. It consumes everything it touches, leaving nothing but ash. Napoleon Hill described the power of burning desire, the kind that transforms passive hope into relentless focus. Yet the Stoics would caution that desire must be tempered by reason, shaped by patience, and directed without attachment to the outcome. This is not contradiction, but synthesis. Desire fuels the mind with energy, reason controls the direction, emotional detachment ensures persistence. Without detachment, desire becomes desperation, and desperation is the scent that repels opportunity. Without reason, desire becomes blind, flailing at the world in chaotic, inefficient motion. Only the fusion of these elements produces the mental environment where wealth can thrive. A mind that craves without needing, a mind that acts with intensity without chaos, a mind that believes without trembling in fear. Your imagination is the theater in which the future is first rehearsed. Every great achievement was once a mental scene, vivid and charged with emotional conviction, played over and over until the subconscious accepted it as inevitable. The problem is that most minds are cluttered stages, crowded with negative scripts, old failures and borrowed fears, and these act as sabotage agents, poisoning the very images you attempt to cultivate. The work is therefore both radical and simple. Purge your mental stage of the obsolete scripts, feed it only with visions of mastery, and rehearse these visions daily until the subconscious cannot tell the difference between imagination and reality. This is where emotional discipline intersects with manifestation. The Stoics would have you observe your feelings without surrendering to them. Napoleon Hill would have you feed the mind images of success repeatedly until they take root. Together, these principles teach a subtle, profound law. You do not attract wealth to a chaotic mind. You attract it to a mind that has been conditioned to receive it with the calm certainty of inevitability. Now, examine your beliefs. Every belief you hold is a program running silently in the background, dictating choices, reactions, and expectations. Most of these beliefs are inherited, unconscious, and unquestioned, and yet they are more powerful than your conscious effort because they operate beneath awareness. Beliefs such as money is hard to come by, I am not capable of success, or fortune is for others, are like roots under fertile soil, silently strangling every seed of ambition you plant. The first step in removing the blockage to wealth is not to chase more opportunities, but to excavate these roots, to question them relentlessly, and to replace them with beliefs that support growth, abundance, and competence. This excavation is not easy, because beliefs are woven into identity. To challenge a belief is to challenge the self, and the ego resists change with ferocious loyalty. The Stoics recognized this struggle. They called it the battle for the mind, the arena in which virtue is forged. Napoleon Hill recognized it as the necessity of a definite major purpose, the unwavering focus on a goal that overrides hesitation, distraction, and fear. You must become both philosopher and strategist in this inner battle, observing every thought, measuring every emotion, and steering your consciousness like a general commanding an army. Emotional mastery is the silent lever of wealth. Observe how you react when a bill is overdue, when a client rejects you, when the market turns against you, or when a plan falters. Most people react with panic, frustration, or self-pity, which strengthens the internal patterns of limitation. The disciplined mind, by contrast, responds with measured calculation, detached assessment, and adaptive action. It does not deny the emotional signal, but uses it as information, a cue to adjust strategy rather than a reason to collapse. This mastery is not inborn. It is trained, like a muscle, through daily practice, reflection, and repetition. The Stoics practiced it through journaling, meditation, and mental rehearsal. Napoleon Hill encouraged it through affirmation, visualization, and the cultivation of faith in unseen outcomes. Both teach the same law: external success is an echo of internal order. If your inner life is chaotic, your outer life will be too. If your inner life is disciplined, your outer life bends in response to your coherence. The mind that blocks wealth does so through resistance, hesitation, fear of loss, attachment to comfort, and unconscious self-sabotage. Every moment of procrastination, every decision made from doubt rather than clarity, every compromise of integrity or vision erects another barrier. But resistance can be dismantled, not by forcing outcomes, but by dismantling the mental architecture that supports it. Replace fear with curiosity, scarcity with abundance, impatience with strategic persistence, and reactive thinking with deliberate response. See every obstacle not as a dead end, but as a mirror revealing a hidden block, a lesson encoded in discomfort, a chance to practice the discipline that wealth requires. This is where the mind is both forge and crucible. Only under sustained pressure does steel become strong, and only through consistent inner work does the mind become magnetic to opportunity. Now, contemplate the rhythm of your daily thoughts. Each day is a microcosm, a training ground where habits are reinforced. The thoughts you dwell on, the images you entertain, the conversations you have with yourself are not trivial. They are the scaffolding upon which your future is built. If you allow fear, doubt, or envy to dominate your inner dialogue, you are constructing walls that block your wealth before it ever arrives. If you cultivate clarity, confidence, and vision, you are building channels that draw opportunity and abundance effortlessly. Napoleon Hill called this the law of autosuggestion. Repetition and emotional intensity encode the subconscious. The Stoics would call it premeditatio malorum, the deliberate anticipation and preparation for challenges, training the mind to remain unmoved by external turbulence. Together, these practices create a mental ecosystem in which wealth is not an accident, but a natural consequence. And within this ecosystem, your mind becomes both laboratory and altar. The laboratory because here experiments are run with precision. Every thought, every judgment, every emotional reaction is measured and understood for its effect on your internal state. The altar, because here you consecrate your vision, your desire, your discipline, transforming them into sacred vows to yourself, promises that are written not on paper but etched into the structure of your consciousness. You begin to see that wealth is not a transaction, but a reflection, a mirror that responds to the resonance of your inner life. It is neither random nor unfair, it is precise, deterministic, exacting. And yet, few understand this because the ego craves immediacy, craving proof in numbers, in paychecks, in trophies, rather than cultivating the unseen inner conditions that inevitably produce these results. You are listening because something in you knows this. There is a restless whisper in your mind, a recognition that your current trajectory is dictated by patterns you do not fully control, by beliefs you have inherited or absorbed unconsciously, by emotional habits that run unseen but shape every outcome. The Stoics would remind you, control begins with perception. Perception, not circumstance, defines your experience. You cannot always dictate the events that occur outside, but you can decide how you interpret them. You can choose whether a market crash is a catastrophe or an opportunity, whether a rejection is failure or feedback, whether a loss is devastation or a lesson in resilience. Napoleon Hill called this definiteness of purpose, the clarity to know precisely what you want and why, and to hold that knowledge steady in the mind, unshaken by temporary setbacks or external noise. When these disciplines merge, the Stoic perception with Hill's purposeful vision, you begin to operate on a higher plane, where setbacks are no longer threats but instruments, where fear becomes information rather than a chain, where desire is energy rather than attachment. Consider the mechanism of thought itself. Thoughts arise like sparks, and if left unattended, they ignite habits and patterns that govern your life unconsciously. Your mind is constantly scripting a movie about you and the world, and if that script is written in scarcity, doubt, and fear, no amount of external hustle will produce abundance. The unconscious mind does not differentiate between imagination and reality. It responds to intensity of belief and repetition. Every vivid visualization of mastery, every emotional rehearsal of success, every deliberate affirmation of competence writes new neural pathways that grow stronger with use, replacing the old, limiting scripts that have kept you small. This is why your wealth has been blocked, not because opportunities are scarce, but because your mind has been broadcasting the wrong frequency, a frequency tuned to limitation, struggle, and delay. And now you are beginning to understand that altering the signal requires both awareness and discipline. Discipline is the silent enforcer of wealth. It is the unseen muscle that flexes every day, in every choice, in every moment when you resist impulse and act according to reason rather than emotion. This is the paradox. Desire fuels action, but action without discipline dissipates into chaos. Discipline directs action, but without desire, it lacks energy. When the two converge, the mind becomes a machine of creation, focused, precise, unshakable. Wealth cannot resist such a mind. The universe does not reward panic, confusion, or desperation. It responds to coherence, clarity, and calm authority. And the authority in question is not external. It is the authority you assert over yourself, over your thoughts, over your emotions. This is mastery, and mastery is magnetic. It does not need to chase, it attracts, organizes, and amplifies. Now let us examine attachment. Most people are blind to the subtle ways attachment blocks wealth. Attachment, comfort, attachment to certainty, attachment to familiar scarcity, attachment to identity, attachment to outcome. Each one acts as a chain, binding the mind to the familiar patterns of limitation. The Stoics taught that the wise man is indifferent to externals. He loves what is within his control and does not tremble at what lies beyond it. Napoleon Hill would reframe this in terms of faith and imagination. The mind that detaches from immediate results but maintains unwavering belief in the ultimate outcome is the mind that creates miracles. Here is the key. Attachment to outcome produces tension, and tension produces incoherence, and incoherence repels opportunity even when it is technically present. Wealth does not flow to those who need it to feel whole. It flows to those whose internal integrity, clarity, and energy naturally resonate with abundance. Look at persistence. Persistence is often romanticized as stubborn effort, but the truth is more subtle. Persistence is the alignment of thought, emotion, and action over time, regardless of immediate feedback. It is the quiet cultivation of belief in the face of resistance, the repeated rehearsal of vision, the daily practice of mental discipline. Every great fortune, every empire, every achievement is the accumulation of persistent inner alignment over months, years, or decades. The impatient mind wants proof too soon and abandons the process, thereby cutting off the very river that would have carried it to abundance. Wealth, like a river, requires patience, constancy, and trust in the unseen mechanisms of cause and effect. Those who cultivate it know how to wait without wavering, to act without attachment, to desire without desperation. The subconscious mind is your most potent ally or your fiercest adversary. It is the filter through which all reality is interpreted and all results are produced. If the subconscious believes limitation, it will generate circumstances that confirm limitation. If it believes abundance, it will generate circumstances that confirm abundance. The conscious mind can feed it through repetition, visualization, affirmation, and focused emotion, but only the disciplined mind ensures that these messages are not diluted by doubt, fear, or contradiction. Here, again, the fusion of Hill and Stoicism is vital. Feed the subconscious with clear vision, emotionally charged but detached, disciplined and unwavering, and it will orchestrate events, people, and opportunities in alignment with that vision. The universe does not make exceptions, it only responds to dominant internal reality. Now consider emotional intelligence as the currency of influence. Every interaction, every negotiation, every transaction is a reflection of your internal state. When R dominates, you repel trust, credibility, and cooperation. When anger dominates, you attract conflict. When envy dominates, you signal scarcity. But when calm confidence dominates, when measured reasoning prevails, when emotional poise guides action, you become magnetic, not merely for money, but for opportunity, connection, and timing. Wealth flows into coherence. This is the subtle art few understand, the hidden mechanism by which fortune aligns with those prepared to receive. Your habits are the scaffolding of your destiny. Observe how you manage daily tasks, deadlines, and obligations. Observe how you treat small promises, fleeting impulses, and subtle challenges. Each moment of integrity, patience, and disciplined focus compounds into a structure strong enough to support significant success. Conversely, every act of negligence, hesitation, or self-compromise weakens the foundation, leaving the mind, and thus the life, fragile and vulnerable to collapse. Napoleon Hill called this building a mastermind within oneself, cultivating habits that elevate thinking, decision-making, and influence. The Stoics would call this cultivation of virtue, of character, and of rational judgment. Together they teach that wealth is less about external maneuvering than about the consistent cultivation of internal strength. Finally, understand that the journey is relentless and precise. There is no magic pill, no lucky break sufficient to overcome a blocked mind. The work is daily, sometimes invisible, often uncomfortable, and it demands vigilance. You will be tested repeatedly. Your fears, your old beliefs, your emotional attachments, your impatience. And each time you respond with clarity, thank you, self-command, and disciplined action, you chip away at the invisible barrier that has blocked your wealth for years. Slowly, imperceptibly, the mind begins to resonate with abundance, and the world responds. The test is constant, but the reward is inevitable for those willing to persist, observe, and master themselves. Have you ever noticed how the mind will fight most fiercely at the threshold of transformation? Just when the vision of wealth feels tangible, just when your imagination begins to resonate with possibility, the old patterns rise like ghosts from the shadows, whispering that you are not ready, that the universe is against you, that effort is futile. This is the invisible battlefield of the psyche, where desire clashes with doubt, where ambition meets inertia, and where the ordinary soul breaks. But the extraordinary mind, the mind tempered by both philosophical reason and metaphysical faith, does not yield. It observes the whispering fears, acknowledges them, and yet refuses to obey. It acts in spite of them, with calm intensity and unwavering focus, because it understands a truth that is invisible to the untrained, that the moment of greatest resistance is also the doorway to the most profound expansion. Your thoughts are not mere reflections, they are architects. Every thought you indulge, every mental image you reinforce, builds a structure of energy within your subconscious. When that energy is chaotic, disorganized, or fear-driven, it constructs walls, blockades, and dead ends in your life, invisible but impenetrable. When that energy is deliberate, coherent, and disciplined, it constructs corridors, bridges, and channels that guide opportunity into your path. Napoleon Hill described this as definiteness of purpose, the clarity and intensity of vision that turns mere hope into unstoppable momentum. The Stoics would call it mastery of the inner citadel, the fortress of thought and judgment where impulses are measured, emotions regulated, and reason prevails. The fusion of these principles creates an internal gravitational field, drawing resources, people, and circumstances toward you not by chance, but by law, because the universe mirrors the internal harmony of the mind with absolute fidelity. Desire is powerful, but it is the combination of desire and controlled emotion that transforms potential into reality. Without control, desire becomes desperation, a chaotic force that repels rather than attracts. With control, desire becomes magnetism, a force that moves through obstacles, converts resistance into momentum, and turns vision into tangible outcome. Every moment you can feel desire without attachment, act with intensity without hysteria, and believe without trembling, you are practicing the art of alignment, the art that Napoleon Hill spoke of in terms of faith and visualization, and the Stoics framed as rational, detached judgment. These are not contradictory ideas, they are two sides of the same coin, the coin of inner authority, the currency that the world cannot counterfeit. Consider your internal dialogue. For most people, it is a cacophony of self-criticism, fear, and indecision. Thoughts race unchecked, forming a chain of subtle sabotage that prevents even the most brilliant opportunities from manifesting. The mind is broadcasting the wrong signal: I am not ready, I am not capable, I do not deserve. These statements, repeated silently and unconsciously, program the subconscious to confirm their truth. The law of cause and effect operates without bias, without mercy, reflecting the internal state outward in a perfect echo. To reverse this pattern, to unblock your wealth, you must become the observer and editor of your mind. Every thought must be scrutinized, every fear confronted, every doubt analyzed, until the mental signal becomes clean, coherent, and aligned with abundance. This is the rigorous discipline that separates the wealthy-minded from the perpetually struggling. Action alone is insufficient without this inner alignment. Many pursue wealth with frantic energy, hoping that effort will substitute for coherence. But the universe does not reward motion, it rewards alignment. This is why some work tirelessly yet achieve little, while others, calm, deliberate, and aligned, seem to attract fortune effortlessly. The difference is invisible but undeniable. One mind is coherent, broadcasting clarity; the other is chaotic, broadcasting need and doubt. Wealth responds not to effort alone, but to the quality of consciousness behind that effort. This is the fusion of metaphysical law and Stoic practice. Hill provides the blueprint for conception and faith, the visualization and belief necessary to seed reality. Stoicism provides the regulation of emotion, the discipline to maintain calm, and the rational clarity to act decisively. Together, they form an engine of creation more potent than any external strategy, more reliable than luck, and more precise than ambition alone. Let us explore fear. Fear is the most powerful signal of misalignment. It is subtle, creeping in to thought, emotion, and action, unnoticed until it has blocked opportunity completely. Fear whispers that you are not capable, that others are more deserving, that failure is inevitable. The untrained mind obeys, freezes, hesitates, compromises, and thus validates the fear, creating a feedback loop of limitation. But the disciplined mind observes fear without surrendering. It feels the fear, acknowledges it, and acts anyway. The Stoics call this the courage of reason, not the absence of fear, but the mastery of response. Napoleon Hill would call it faith and persistence, the unwavering commitment to a vision despite obstacles, resistance, and uncertainty. In this fusion, fear becomes a teacher, a measure of what still requires internal fortification, and each act of deliberate courage expands the capacity for wealth. Your imagination is the laboratory of reality. Every great fortune begins as a vivid, emotionally charged mental image. The subconscious cannot distinguish imagination from experience. It responds to intensity of belief and repetition. But most minds are polluted with negative imagery, self-doubt, and habitual limitation. These mental toxins act as blockages, preventing wealth from taking shape in the outer world. The task, then, is to cleanse the mind, to rehearse success with deliberate emotion, to feed the subconscious with consistent, coherent, and charged images of mastery. Visualization alone is insufficient. It must be paired with emotional discipline, detached desire, and unwavering persistence. Only then does imagination become a womb for reality, incubating abundance until it manifests in alignment with inner clarity. The subconscious is also influenced by belief systems. Every assumption you hold about money, success, and your own worth acts as a programming rule, determining how energy flows in your life. Limiting beliefs such as "I am not good enough" or "money is scarce" become automatic self-sabotage devices, invisible yet potent. To unblock wealth, these beliefs must be identified, challenged, and replaced with principles that reinforce capability, abundance, and alignment. This requires both awareness and courage, for the ego resists rewriting the script that has protected its comfort, even when that script limits your potential. The Stoics called this courage of the mind, the ability to act according to reason, even when it threatens prior identity. Napoleon Hill described it as the creation of a definite major purpose, a vision so compelling that it overrides fear, hesitation, and inertia. Together, these approaches offer a systematic method for clearing the blocks to wealth at the deepest levels of mind. Persistence is often misunderstood as brute force effort. True persistence is not mindless repetition, but deliberate, aligned action sustained over time. It is the repeated affirmation of vision, the daily practice of mental discipline, the patient cultivation of internal resonance, until the subconscious cannot deny its command. Every great success story is a history of persistence, but the persistence that produces wealth is guided by inner alignment, not desperation. Desire provides fuel, discipline provides direction, and detachment prevents collapse under uncertainty. This trinity is the architecture of unstoppable momentum, the fusion of metaphysical creation and Stoic mastery, the silent mechanism by which the mind generates real results in the outer world. Now, consider patience. Patience is not passivity. It is active, deliberate, and observant. The impatient mind attempts to force outcomes, but the disciplined mind understands that wealth is the product of alignment, not frantic motion. Nature itself follows rhythm and timing. Rivers carve valleys over centuries. Seeds grow into forests over decades. Mountains are shaped by slow, invisible forces. Wealth behaves the same way. It is cultivated in the unseen, in the repetition of aligned thoughts, in the daily maintenance of disciplined emotion, in the unwavering clarity of vision. Every moment you resist urgency, every act of composure in the face of uncertainty, every decision made with reason rather than panic, reinforces a frequency of abundance. The universe responds to this frequency with consistency, offering doors that previously seemed closed, opportunities that were invisible, and momentum that feels effortless because it is a reflection of your internal harmony, your inner environment. The collection of thoughts, beliefs, and emotional states is the fertile soil in which fortune grows. Most people neglect this soil. They complain about droughts in their lives while allowing weeds of doubt, fear, and resentment to take root. They cultivate impatience, anger, and insecurity while expecting riches to blossom naturally. Wealth, like all life, requires care, attention, and disciplined nurturing. The moment you begin to observe, prune, and fertilize your internal garden with intention, you create conditions where abundance is not only possible but inevitable. Napoleon Hill emphasized the importance of definition, S of purpose, and repeated affirmation. The Stoics insisted on emotional regulation and rational judgment. Together, These principles teach that the mind is not merely a container for opportunity, it is the engine of creation. Discipline also governs energy. Energy is finite, and where it flows, reality follows. Uncontrolled emotion, scattered attention, and habitual distraction dissipate energy into chaos, leaving little for intentional creation. The mind that has learned to focus, to channel, to align thought and feeling toward a singular purpose becomes unstoppable. Every choice is deliberate, every action purposeful, every moment infused with direction. This is not rigid control, but the art of internal orchestration, the careful tuning of cognition and emotion until your consciousness hums with resonance, vibrating in harmony with the abundance you intend to receive. Consider setbacks. They are inevitable. No one escapes them. But they are neither punishments nor indicators of incapacity. They are feedback, mirrors reflecting misalignment, lessons coded in discomfort. The untrained mind reacts with frustration, anxiety, and despair. The disciplined mind reacts with observation, analysis, and strategic adjustment. The Stoic recognizes the inevitability of challenges and meets them with calm reason. Napoleon Hill teaches that obstacles are opportunities in disguise, that every difficulty contains the seed of equal or greater benefit. The fusion of these teachings produces a mind that welcomes challenges as instruments for refinement, strengthening the mental architecture that ultimately attracts wealth. Now, let us examine belief itself. Belief is the silent ruler of destiny. It underpins every thought, governs every decision, and programs the subconscious. Most beliefs are inherited, unconscious, and unquestioned, silently limiting potential. I am not enough. Success is for others. Money is scarce. These are invisible chains, shaping outcomes without conscious awareness. To unblock wealth, beliefs must be examined and transformed. This is not mere positive thinking, it is deep cognitive restructuring, a deliberate replacement of patterns that no longer serve you with patterns that align with abundance. Napoleon Hill spoke of the power of faith in the unseen. Hill's definition of belief infused with certainty. The Stoics taught the supremacy of reason over impulse. Together, they create a method for rewiring belief at the deepest level, converting the subconscious into an ally rather than an obstacle. Your mind is a broadcast tower. What you feel, what you dwell upon, what you imagine is transmitted outward, and reality returns it to you in amplified form. Anxiety, doubt, resentment, fear, and attachment produce signals that repel wealth. Calm, confidence, clarity, and disciplined desire produce signals that attract it. The difference is subtle but profound. The universe does not respond to casual wishing. It responds to coherent, repeated, and emotionally charged intention, tempered with detachment and inner calm. This is the point where metaphysical law and Stoic mastery intersect. The mind must be both energized and disciplined, alive with purpose yet calm with control, burning with desire yet anchored in reason. Only then does wealth flow unhindered. Attachment is a subtle blocker. Attachment to outcome, to validation, to comfort, or to identity binds the mind to limitation. Desire without attachment creates motion without tension, ambition without desperation, faith without anxiety. The Stoics emphasized detachment as freedom, and Napoleon Hill emphasized the intensity of belief without neediness. Together, these teach that wealth is drawn not to those who require it for survival, but to those whose internal stability and coherence naturally attract it. The moment you release emotional neediness, the channel opens and opportunity flows. Consider how internal dialogue shapes reality. Every whispered fear, every negative thought, every habitual judgment is a blueprint for action and consequence. The mind that observes, analyzes, and corrects its own dialogue becomes a conductor orchestrating circumstance, opportunity, and outcome with precision. Wealth is not accidental. It is the echo of a disciplined mind, the manifestation of internal coherence projected outward. Napoleon Hill called this autosuggestion. The Stoics framed it as mastery over impressions. Both describe the same law. External reality responds to the dominant internal state. When you take control of your inner narrative, you take control of your life. Persistence, patience, and discipline are the engines that move this process forward. Desire is the spark, imagination is the laboratory, belief is the fuel, and disciplined action is the vehicle. Wealth accumulates not from randomness, but from the repeated alignment of thought, emotion, and action over time. The impatient, undisciplined mind fails because it expects immediate return, reacts to obstacles with fear, and dilutes intention with distraction. The disciplined mind endures, perseveres, and acts deliberately. Each repetition reinforces alignment. Each act of mastery strengthens the subconscious. Each disciplined choice amplifies the gravitational field that draws opportunity toward you. Now, recognize the subtlety of timing. The universe operates with precision, not haste. Wealth is rarely delivered in chaotic bursts. It flows to those who have cultivated readiness. This readiness is internal: clarity of vision, discipline of emotion, precision of thought, and coherence of belief. The unprepared mind will mismanage even the greatest opportunity. The prepared mind will recognize it, seize it, and multiply it. Napoleon Hill called this the result of definiteness of purpose. The Stoics would call it preparedness through reason and virtue. Together they teach that fortune is not random but responsive. It arrives for those whose inner state resonates with the law of abundance. Do you feel it? The subtle tension in your chest, the whisper of doubt that arises when you consider stepping fully into your potential, the quiet voice that questions whether you are ready to claim the life you imagine. That tension is no accident. It is the residue of a mind trained in limitation, a mind that has obeyed every small fear, every inherited belief, every habitual hesitation for decades, and it will resist change because the unknown threatens the identity you have long defended. The mind prefers familiarity, even if it is scarcity, because familiarity is safe. But you are listening because you are not willing to settle. You are beginning to recognize that true mastery requires a confrontation with yourself, a deliberate engagement with the architecture of your consciousness, and a willingness to endure discomfort in service of a larger vision. The Stoics called this courage. Napoleon Hill called this faith. Together, they reveal the law that governs every manifestation. The outer world cannot exceed the inner reality. Every limitation you perceive, every obstacle you encounter, is first a reflection of your inner state. Scarcity is not a natural condition. It is a resonance created by fear, doubt, and emotional misalignment. Resistance is not arbitrary. It is the response of the universe to the incoherence of your thoughts and emotions. Desire alone cannot overcome this. Effort alone is insufficient. You must refine, calibrate, and discipline your mind until it vibrates in harmony with the abundance you intend to receive. This is subtle, invisible work, but it is the true alchemy of wealth. It is not flashy. It does not promise instant gratification. It is deliberate, slow, and profound, reshaping you from the inside out until your external world bends in obedience to your internal coherence. Your imagination is not a luxury. It is the laboratory where reality is first conceived. Every fortune, every empire, every breakthrough was first rehearsed in vivid, emotionally charged images. But the untrained mind imagines scarcity, repeats old fears, and unconsciously sabotages itself. The disciplined mind, by contrast, harnesses imagination with purpose, feeding the subconscious with clarity, intensity, and coherence. The Stoics would temper this vision with reason, teaching that detachment from outcome preserves emotional stability. Napoleon Hill would charge it with faith and desire, teaching that intensity and belief are necessary to seed the subconscious. Together, these principles create a potent force. Imagination becomes a womb in which the future is gestated until it is ready to manifest. Belief is the silent ruler of your potential. It governs perception, decision, and action, often operating unnoticed. Most beliefs are inherited or absorbed unconsciously, quietly shaping your reality. I am not enough. Opportunities are rare. Success is for others. Each of these is a subtle block, a command written into the operating system of your mind. To unblock wealth, these beliefs must be identified, questioned, and replaced with principles that support abundance, competence, and alignment. This is cognitive reconstruction on a profound level, the work of the mind and soul combined. The Stoics would call it the mastery of judgment, the ability to act according to reason rather than impulse. Napoleon Hill would call it definiteness of purpose, the creation of a vision so compelling that it overrides fear, hesitation, and limitation. Together, they provide a methodology for reshaping your inner world in service of wealth. Emotional discipline is the lever of influence. Every interaction, every negotiation, every transaction reflects your internal state. Fear, doubt, and impatience repel trust, opportunity, and cooperation. Calm confidence, clarity, and deliberate action attract them. The untrained mind unconsciously projects scarcity and hesitation. The disciplined mind projects composure, certainty, and magnetic presence. Wealth responds to this resonance. It is invisible but absolute. Napoleon Hill taught that the subconscious accepts repeated, emotionally charged images as reality. The Stoics taught that emotions must be observed and regulated. Together, they form a system in which your inner coherence directs the flow of external events with precision. Attachment is a subtle yet powerful barrier. Attachment to outcome, to validation, to comfort, or to identity produces tension, anxiety, and distraction. Desire without attachment allows action without desperation, ambition without chaos, faith without anxiety. The Stoics would call this freedom. Napoleon Hill would call it faith in unseen forces. When you release attachment, you create the space in which opportunity can enter. The channel opens and wealth flows naturally, not by force, but by alignment with internal resonance. Patience is not passive, it is deliberate. The impatient mind forces outcomes, reacts to obstacles with anxiety, and sabotages momentum. The disciplined mind understands timing. Wealth is cultivated over time through repetition, persistence, and alignment. Nature itself follows rhythm. Rivers carve valleys slowly. Seeds grow into forests over decades. Mountains rise over centuries. Wealth behaves the same way. Daily alignment, emotional control, and repeated disciplined action prepare you to receive when the time is right. The impatient will miss the currents. The prepared will ride them effortlessly. Persistence is often misunderstood. It is not stubborn repetition, but deliberate, aligned action sustained over time. Every great success story is a history of persistence. Not aimless effort, but focused, consistent cultivation of internal alignment. Desire provides fuel, discipline provides direction, and detachment prevents collapse under uncertainty. Each repetition reinforces the neural pathways of competence. Each act of mastery strengthens the subconscious. Each deliberate choice amplifies the inner gravitational field that attracts apport. Unity. Persistence is the engine that converts internal coherence into external manifestation. Consider setbacks. They are inevitable, but not punishments. They are feedback, mirrors revealing misalignment, lessons coded in discomfort. The untrained mind reacts with fear, frustration, or despair. The disciplined mind reacts with observation, analysis, and strategic adjustment. The Stoics called this the exercise of virtue. Napoleon Hill called it the recognition of opportunity disguised as adversity. The fusion produces a mind that treats challenges not as threats, but as instruments of refinement, shaping the inner architecture necessary to magnetize wealth. The subconscious mind is both ally and adversary. It records every thought, belief, and emotion, and generates behavior and circumstances accordingly. Fear and doubt program limitation. Faith and alignment program abundance. The conscious mind feeds the subconscious deliberately through repetition, visualization, and charged emotion. The disciplined mind ensures that messages are coherent, consistent, and aligned with vision. Napoleon Hill emphasized emotional intensity. The Stoics emphasized rational observation and detachment. Together, these practices convert the subconscious from a hidden saboteur into a powerful co-creator. Your internal state is the true determinant of external outcomes. Every habit, thought, and emotion reinforces a frequency that the universe reflects. If you harbor fear, scarcity, or resentment, you broadcast limitation. If you cultivate calm confidence, clarity, and alignment, you broadcast abundance. This is the subtle law that governs every manifestation. The world reflects the dominant saint. 8 of your consciousness. Wealth is not given. It is mirrored back to the coherence within you. Now, observe the subtle power of routine. Each day, each action, each thought compounds over time. Habits are the scaffolding of your future. Every disciplined choice, every act of patience, every moment of reasoned response builds the framework for sustained wealth. Every indulgence in doubt, procrastination, or distraction weakens it. Napoleon Hill called this the cultivation of mental habit. The Stoics called it the repeated exercise of virtue. Together, they teach that fortune is not random. It is the natural outcome of internal architecture. Attention is the currency of creation. Where your focus goes, energy flows. Yet most people scatter their attention across trivialities, gossip, fear, and distraction, and wonder why life resists them. The disciplined mind, however, masters attention as a sculptor wields a chisel, cutting away distraction, shaping thought, and focusing mental energy precisely on the objective of wealth and mastery. Attention is not merely concentration, it is selection, it is prioritization, it is the deliberate orchestration of mental resources to align with vision. Every untrained moment dissipates potential, every trained moment channels latent power into coherent action. Napoleon Hill emphasized the power of concentrated thought, the deliberate focus on a single goal with all faculties engaged. The Stoics framed this as the control of impressions, the ability to attend only to what is rationally chosen. Together, these disciplines transform attention from a passive reaction into a proactive force, a magnetic current that pulls opportunity and resources toward the aligned mind. The interplay between belief and emotion is subtle, yet decisive. Belief alone is insufficient if it is not emotionally charged. Emotion alone is insufficient if it is not aligned with belief. Faith, in this sense, is not wishful thinking. It is the conscious marriage of certainty and feeling repeated until it becomes encoded in the subconscious. The Stoics would temper this with detachment, ensuring that emotional intensity does not dissolve into hysteria or desperation. Napoleon Hill would charge it with desire, ensuring that faith is actionable, not passive. The fusion of these principles creates a mental state of dynamic equilibrium, intense, focused, and unwavering, yet calm, reasoned, and adaptable. This is the state in which wealth naturally manifests because the inner world has been disciplined into resonance with abundance. Now let us examine the silent power of mental rehearsal. Every image, every visualization, every emotional rehearsal programs the mind. Most minds are filled with images of limitation, failed attempts, missed opportunities, scarcity and disappointment. These images are more powerful than any external obstacle, for they shape perception, decision and action before reality has a chance to intervene. To unblock wealth, the mind must be intentionally saturated with images of mastery, abundance and competence. Each rehearsal strengthens neural pathways, rewires subconscious expectations, and aligns behavior with vision. Napoleon Hill emphasized the repetition of clear, emotionally charged mental pictures. The Stoics would encourage reflection and rational examination of these images to ensure they serve purpose rather than ego. The combination creates a precise and unstoppable internal architecture for success. Consider the subtlety of self-talk. Every internal statement, every repeated judgment, reinforces the neural script that guides behavior. I cannot do this program's hesitation. I am unworthy program's limitation. I will fail program